Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. I'm here with Drew Dinkmeyer from dailyroto.com, and we are going to give you the tips that we have developed over the 6, 7, 8 years that we've been playing daily fantasy baseball to give you the best chance to learn how to win at MLB in daily fantasy on Draftkings. So we're going to go through different positions. We're going to start with pitcher. We're going to go to the hitters. We're going to talk about cash games. We're going to talk about tournament strategies. We're going to talk about stacking and try to give you all the tools that you need to build the best process so that you can be a winning player on DraftKings as well. There's going to be ups and downs. Nobody has a magic pill that you can take and all of a sudden you're going to win every single day in daily fantasy baseball or daily fantasy anything for that matter. It's more important to have a good process. It's more important to know what you're doing on a day-to-day basis so that you can attack each slate with confidence, make the right decisions, and then after the slate, be sure that you're looking back and comparing yourself to other players as well, your lineups to other players and your decision-making to other players, so that you know whether or not you're making the best decisions moving forward, and always be ready to tweak your process. Ours has been time-tested, battle-tested. Drew's won a ton of things in his daily fantasy career in all different sports. Basketball, he's won $1 million in football. I also won that $1 million in football in 2016. I think you won it, Drew, in 2015, or was it 14? 2014. So a 2-year gap. He won it before me. So I was always jealous of that. And then I finally caught up in 2016. We've both had really good careers from an ROI perspective, return on investment in terms of daily fantasy baseball. And we're going to talk to you about how to be better. So let's start with the rules on DraftKings. The scoring on DraftKings, you get 3 points for a single, 5 for a double, 8 for a triple, 10 for a home run, 2 each for a run batted in, a run, or a walk. And then your pitchers, 2 points for each strikeout, 2.25 points for each inning pitch. So each out, you get 0.75. A win is worth only 4. So 2 strikeouts is worth as much as a win. An earned run is -2. So if a guy has 2 earned runs and strikes out 10, that is a big net positive. A hit, you lose 0.6. A walk against, you lose 0.6. And a hit batsman, you lose 0.6. So, Drew, I usually start with pitching, personally. I assume that you do as well.
Where I start each and every day.
Okay. So, that's where we're going to start. Here we have the pitchers. Let me bring up the bigger screen so you guys can see it. And Todd from PA, thank you very much for the Twitch Prime sub. I've known Todd for a couple of years. He went to a boot camp a few years ago, and I got to spend the day and talk to him out in, was it Boston? I think it was the Boston boot camp. So it was nice meeting him, if I remember correctly, which exactly one it was. So it was nice to meet him. So thank you for joining us here on the stream. For those of you on YouTube, if you're new to the channel, please click that subscribe button. Make sure you like this video before you get done with it. And this video is going to be evergreen. So these are tips that would have worked 5 years ago in daily fantasy baseball, and they still work today. This is an evergreen video. We're recording this right before MLB is going to start in 2019. It is March the 19th. So just to catch everybody up on what everything is. So in terms of pitchers, my biggest rule, Drew, is K's or king. Strikeouts are the biggest thing that I go after. I want pitchers that are going to strike out a ton of guys, or at least have double-digit strikeout potential, 8+ strikeout potential. How do we go about finding those guys and identifying them?
Identifying a good starting pitcher in daily fantasy baseball is trying to think of it in the context of strikeouts per dollar spent. The more strikeouts you can get projected per dollar spent, the better you're off in your lineups from a starting point. So for me, the way that we project strikeouts is very detailed in terms of we take the pitcher and their strikeout rate and we apply it to every single batter that's going to be in that opposing lineup for the day. Mm-hmm. And then we end up with a final strikeout projection, which you can see there on our projections at Daily Roto. But if you don't have the projections at Daily Roto and you're just trying to kind of figure it out by yourself, one quick and simple way that you can do it is you can look at a pitcher's strikeout rate, either their K per 9 or their K percentage. I prefer K percentage. And you can compare it to a team's strikeout rate, either their K per 9 or their K percentage. And you want to match up pitchers who strike out a lot of batters versus the opposing team who strikes out frequently. That's the name of the game in terms of generating strikeouts.
Now, I would always measure things versus him. And I did projections when I was doing projections for MLB. I did them differently than a lot of other people did. I always used the weighted runs created, which was one of my favorite stats in baseball, right? And weighted runs created, for those of you who don't know, average is 100. Okay, and each number over 100, you can see here I've got fan graphs up, and I'm sorting by hitters right now. So Mike Trout last season had a weighted runs created plus of 191. Okay, that meant he was 91% better than the average player. Okay, which I'm laughing because that's ridiculous. And Mookie Betts was 85% better, and JD Martinez was 70% better than the average hitter. Okay, now if you're below 100, which nobody on the top 30 is going to be below 100, that means you're lower than average. So what I would look at, to expand on what Drew said, was I'm looking at K percentage for the pitcher, and I'm sorting the opposing team by K percentage against the handedness of the starting pitcher. Their overall strikeout percentage, most definitely important, but they're, because bullpens are going to come into play at some point, whatever, if you're picking hitters. But in terms of how good that pitcher is going to do, I'm measuring it against how much that team strikes out against the handedness of pitchers. Some teams are much better against left-handed pitchers because they're stacked with righties. Some teams are better against right-handed pitchers. They have a bunch of lefties throughout their lineup and some guys who can righties that mash other right-handed pitchers. So strikeout percentage versus handedness, also very important to me. What is your pitching budget? Because obviously on opening day, we've got Jason Verlander at 11,000, and not all the pitchers are here marked as starters yet because not every team has announced their starting pitcher. Not really important for this video. Obviously, there's 9 games on the opening day slate, so there's going to be 18 starting pitchers. We don't have that many right now. You can see they range from as high right now as 11K down to 4,800. What is your typical range? Because obviously just saying, well, spend exactly this much on a starting pitcher isn't going to be relevant, right? And it's going to be different from cash games to tournaments. But I tend to stay in some sort of a range, and some days I go over, right? Now, beginning of the season, when ones are facing ones and twos are facing twos, and you've got a lot of aces on the mound on one day, on one slate, I'll probably end up spending a little bit more at the first week or two of the season on pitching while teams are in that 1, 2, 3 slot in their rotation. And maybe I go over my budget. My budget is typically between 17 and 20,000 that I spend on pitchers. And I know that's a little bit wider a range than just saying, well, spend exactly 18K, but that's about the range that I stay in. So, Drew, what range do you have? Or do you just say, you know what, there's no range for me. I just take it day by day.
Every day is certainly unique, but I think if you're trying to set like a guideline and a rule of thumb, I would be more likely to spend, I would widen that range a little bit, but then I would say 16 to 20K is about usually where I am. And then if you were playing like a cash game, I'd probably be towards the upper end of that range on most days. And if you were playing a tournament, I'd probably be on the lower end of that range most days. And that's in large part because pitching is much more predictable than hitting, but it has a limited upside. There's only so many points that a pitcher can accrue in a given game because they have limitations in terms of the number of outs they can get, the number of batters they can strike out. There are no limitations on batters. Batters could theoretically hit 20 times in a game if their team scored like 100 runs. So batters have more upside than pitchers, which is why in tournament lineups, I'm more likely to spend a little bit more on bats than on pitching. And in cash games, I'm a little bit more likely to spend on pitching than bats.
Right. So when you're spending on your pitching, you get a higher floor, right? And theoretically, you get less variance because a pitcher can face, needs to get 27 outs, can face 35, 40 batters in a game, right? Now, a hitter is going to get, realistically, 4 at-bats on a day-in, day-out basis. And maybe 2.5 of those are going to come against the starting pitcher that you're researching for that hitter against that starting pitcher, right? And then it goes to the bullpens, you get specialists, you get closers, you get setup guys and bridge guys. So if you're going to spend, that's also why pitchers are more money, right? They're going to make up the majority of what you're going to spend. There's 2 pitchers going to eat up possibly 17 to 20K of your budget, and the other 30K is going to go to the other 8 hitters. So I recommend spending on pitching, especially in head-to-heads. As Drew said, like on opening day, if you're going to go with Verlander and Kluber, or Verlander and Snell, or Kluber and Snell, that's going to leave you with an average remaining salary per player of $3,562. And there's going to be value hitters that you can find. Chat, if there's anything else that you guys want to know about how you pick pitchers or what we should do there, feel free, please, to drop a question in the chat. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, we're recording live on Twitch. The link for that is down below in the description. If you would leave us a comment down below with any questions that you might have, I'm sure that people will be bouncing ideas back and forth on this for eternity on YouTube, since this is kind of more evergreen content. So Is there anything else for pitching that we're willing to, like, people are always going to ask this question, right? So, like, you're going to spend that much on pitching. That means that you can't afford the high dollar hitters, right? Mike Trout is 5,600, Arenado 5,500, Chris Bryant 5,400 against Minor. So people kind of get sucked in sometimes and want to really come down and say, oh, I can do this. And Colorado's outside of Colorado and they're overpriced. And then I can kind of, well, you know, Jameson strikes out a bunch of dudes. There, I've got an average salary of 4,400. I can stack all the hitters now. So why shouldn't we go with super cheap pitching more days than not?
That's why you play tournaments. You play tournaments because you take the risks on the lower end pitching that they can produce a reasonable number that allows you to basically get in all those big hitters in your lineup. And in tournaments, we'll talk a little bit about this, I'm sure, but you want to stack hitters from the same lineup. And oftentimes those lineups will be correlated in their price as well. So sometimes if you're trying to take, a bunch of hitters from Colorado when they're in Colorado, they'll all be very, very expensive. Or if you're trying to take a lot of hitters on this slate from the Cubs while they're in Texas, which is a great hitting environment, you're going to need those resources to be able to do so. So in tournaments, that's why I'm willing to spend down at pitcher a little bit more frequently, still using the same principles that I'm using to try to identify high-end pitchers in terms of strikeouts per dollar spent, but willing to assume a little bit of a lower floor on those cheaper pitchers.
Right. So, and I kind of do the same. And it's funny because I always start with pitching, right? And I've said this at the beginning, you do the same. When I'm building tournament stacks, and we'll get to stacks later, we're going to do hitters and we'll talk about stacks a little bit later, but just a note, when I'm doing stacks, I work on my stack and then I find two pitchers that I'm okay with that'll fit with the stack. Because like Drew mentioned, if you're playing Rockies in Colorado, which by the way, when the weather warms up around June, you're probably going to want to stack guys that are playing in Colorado, whether it's the Rockies or the opposing team. They're going to be really expensive, and then you've got to find guys that stick with them. Steve Boynton with 200 bits asks, thoughts on a single entry approach for MLB? Normally, I'm a one lineup player per slate in the other sports, and he enjoys rooting for one group of guys per night. Is it viable to run single entry lineups in MLB?
Absolutely. It's viable to play all different approaches in all different sports. They just have different distribution patterns on returns that you have to be prepared for. And so it just makes it a different way to play the game. And so if you're playing a single entry, I would recommend normally focusing that type of approach on contests where your competitors have a similar number of lineups. So I would focus on single entry, 3-max type contests. And to play that way, one of the advantages that you have is in a sport like baseball where there is a lot of variance and a Mike Trout can go 0 for 4 on, like 25 to 30% of the days that he's going to be a hitter. Advantage of that variance and put it on your side by going contrarian. And so especially even in single entry and 3-max, I know a lot of people will say in like single entry or 3-max, you can create a team that's close to a cash game lineup and then just a pivot here or there. I don't think that's the case in baseball, where it's a really high variance sport and ownerships can condense. I think you want to take advantage of that and kind of shoot for the moon and play a little bit more contrarian. Doesn't mean you have to play the team that's facing Justin Verlander. Doesn't mean you have to stack the Rays against Justin Verlander. You don't have to go way off the board, but you might want to take that, 4th or 5th rated stack on a given day and play that in, single entry 3-max, where you can hopefully get ownerships on your players in the sub 10% range. And most of the field is kind of in the 20+% range on a few key teams that day.
The easiest way that I've always come up with to do it, and I'm going to use the Daily Roto page here. Let me get rid of the teams so that, well, maybe I can't.
Select the slate
settings
first.
There we go. I got to pick a slate first. Slate, main. Oh, this is still September 30th now. This is still last season. It was the other one a second ago.
Yeah, I dropped the other link for you.
Oh, okay. Give me a second. Just so I can show this real quick. Settings, get rid of this here. Boom. Okay. So if I sort by value, that gives Daily Roto's top values on the day, regardless of what slate it is. Okay. So if I'm building a single entry lineup, Joey Votto, Edwin Encarnacion, the two best first basemen value wise on that day, Ian Desmond third. I'm scratching these 3 guys off my list for a single entry tournament. I'm then going to pick from these other guys who still are in very good spots. Goldschmidt against a lefty, Rizzo against a righty. All these situations in all these first basemen have single or double home run potential, right? But I'm going to stay away from the higher percentage owned on the higher projected players. Same sort of idea, right? If I stay away from DJ LeMahieu in Colorado or Jose Ramirez going up against Kansas City on this day, and I can focus on Altuve, I can focus on Murphy, I can focus on one of these guys who is still a positive player on the day, right? But not going to carry the ownership of the top 2 or 3 guys. I can build a really good tournament lineup with a really high ceiling, a solid enough floor to be viable to even sneak into the money if I'm not having a ceiling day, but still give me a chance to win with players in really good position. So to me, that's the way I go about thinking about building a single entry tournament lineup, is ignoring the highest owned players. The easiest way to do that, cross off the top 2 or 3 guys by position on each one of the slates. So moving to hitters now, since that's kind of what we're talking about, what are a couple of things that you look at with your pitchers, Drew, or with your hitters? Sorry.
Yeah, so when I'm looking at hitters, there's a couple of factors that all go into making a good projection or a good decision on a hitter. The first is the skill set of the hitter, particularly based on the platoon, based on the handedness of the pitcher that he's going to face. The second is the skill set of the opposing pitcher, and again, particularly against the handedness he's going to face. Then from there, things like the park environment that they're going to play in, the bullpen behind the starting pitcher, the implied total, which is partly involved in the park that they're going to play in as well. And then especially batting order as well, because, you know, these games are points-based games and you want the most chances to accrue points possible. And so players that hit higher in the lineup often have a higher projection because they have a little bit higher plate appearance expectation. So those are most of the factors that go in. We kind of take all those factors and put them into an algorithm and come up with a projection. But those are the things that you should be thinking about on a daily basis when selecting your hitters.
Now, very basically for me, to keep this as simple as possible, right? So like, I want this video to be able to be understood by new players, but also be able to be consumed by players that have been playing daily fantasy, especially daily fantasy baseball, for a few seasons already and want some advanced tips as well. So Drew just gave you a few advanced tips. I'm going to give you a very simple one. As Drew said, you want as many cracks as you can. You want your hitters to get as many at-bats as possible. So you want guys that are have a possibility of scoring a bunch of runs. Right here on the Daily Roto projections page, you can see IRT, implied run total. That means the teams are going to score more. The more runs they score, the more the lineup turns over. Guess who gets more at-bats? The guys at the top of the order. So if you're going to pick guys that are hitting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe extend that to the 6th batter, especially for cash games, is where I genuinely focus, is trying to pick players in the top 5 of the batting order because they have the most chance. 1, they're the best hitters in the lineups. 2, they have the most chance at getting more at-bats, maybe 1 more at-bat than somebody else has, and that can make all the difference in a GPP. How many times do you get that one last at-bat and the guy hits an RBI double that moves you up a ton, right? All of a sudden, you have a much better chance of making a lot of money versus just a little bit of money because these tournaments are so top-heavy, or it pushes you over the top in a double-double, over that cash line in a 50-50, or ahead of the opponent you're playing in a head-to-head. So I focus on guys at the top of the order, high implied run totals, especially using that splits versus handedness. We can get as deep as we want with that. And you can see it right here as well. They have the weighted on base average for a full for Mike Trout, and then the weighted on base average for him versus the handedness of the pitcher, which is very similar, but you're going to find players that have big swings in their WOBA or in their ISO or in their any other handedness stats. Then you can go even deeper. There's parks that are more friendly to right-handed power hitters than left-handed power hitters. There's a lot of different ways that we can look at this and a lot of different ways that we can go, and the rabbit hole goes as deep as you want. But to keep it very simple, focus on guys hitting in the top 5 of the order. For tournaments, though, we can go deeper than that because we talked about wanting to get stacked hitters, right? So focusing on players from just one team, you want 5 Rangers. Drew, do you want to talk about the stacking rules on DraftKings real quick?
Yeah, so the stacking rules on DraftKings are fairly simple. You can have a maximum of 5 players from one team, and then you can have 3 teams total represented, I believe is the deal. So I think you can have a pitcher be from a different team, but 5 hitters from one team is the main thing. And so you can make stacks that are 5 hitters from one team, 2 hitters from another, and then a random 5 hitters from one team, 3 hitters from another team. You can make stacks of 3 or 4, but generally people, when they're talking about stacking, they're talking about 3+ hitters from the same lineup.
So however you want to focus that, and tournament stacking in baseball has been the highest winning percentage of any strategy in daily fantasy baseball over the years. If you want to take a few teams and stack them, if you're doing multi-entry, whether you're playing 3 max or 5 max or 20 max, a lot of people will stack specific teams. It doesn't mean you're 100% going to win if you just stack the top 5 hitters from a team, but it is a very powerful strategy because of how highly correlated those batters are when they're hitting one or a one gap away from one another. Let's say the leadoff hitter gets on, steals second, they bunt him over to third or sacrifice him over to third, or they hit it to the right side of the infield. Then the number 3 hitter gets a double. He gets the RBI, you get the run, you get the points for the double. All those points, if they have big innings and go through that section of the lineup that you have, all result in points for you, and they stack up really, really quickly. And it's the fastest way to move an entire lineup from the 20th percentile to the 80th percentile with 1 or 2 big innings. So stacking, obviously the highest, the most powerful way to attack daily fantasy baseball tournaments, especially from a mass multi-entry point of view.
I think even in single entry or 3 max type tournaments, you want to consider stacking as well, because you're really in a lot of these tournaments, the prize pools are so top heavily weighted that when you're playing these tournaments, you're really trying to finish in the top 5, top 10. If you finish in the cash, that's great, but it doesn't really move the needle. It's just kind of saving you another day's worth of entry fees to keep trying to attack at the top. So you want to take strategies that correlate your lineups better, that bring you more upside. And yes, there's going to be days where you stack a team that doesn't score any runs, and you're going to be at the very bottom of a tournament. You're going to be like, well, this didn't go well. And there's going to be some days where you stack a team and they score 14, 15 runs, and you're going to be contending for the top spot. And the real big difference in stacking is that correlation, both in terms of, as you suggested, Al, the ability to have hitters do things that help the other hitters in the lineup. But the most important thing is that not all opportunity is created equal in baseball, even though it feels like it is, because you have to go through the whole lineup before a hitter gets another opportunity. Some hitters on a given day are going to get 5 or 6 plate appearances for their team when their team's scoring a ton of runs, versus other hitters on other teams are only going to get 3 or 4. And that's 50% more opportunity than a lot of your competitors. And that's the big thing, those extra opportunities when teams score a ton of runs that allow you to accrue fantasy points.
Exactly. Now, when you get into those situations with stacking, are you going to be facing the starting pitcher if everything goes right for you? You're researching, saying, well, I think they're going to blow up this pitcher, and therefore my guys are going to have, well, if they blow up that pitcher and they do it in the first 3 or 4 innings, you're facing the bullpen the rest of the way. And as Drew said, you don't care because you're just getting more at-bats, right? If you've had 3 at-bats by the end of the 5th inning, your hitters are doing all right. If they've got 10 runs, your hitters theoretically are doing all right, unless Didi Gregorius hits 2 home runs out of the 9 hole or something. You're probably doing fine, right? If you've stacked those teams. And yes, variance is going to happen. Guys are going to hit home runs out of the 8 hole. There's one position that I am willing to reach down in a lineup for, especially to find value for my hitters, and that's typically going to be catcher. Catcher is a position where the best catcher in the league doesn't really average that many more fantasy points per game than the middling catcher, somebody who's maybe got 100 weighted runs created plus as a catcher. It's a defensive first position. Find yourself a catcher that's in a positive offensive environment, meaning ballpark, meaning pitcher that they're facing. And if they're hitting in the 7 or 8 hole, but they're 2,000 to 2,500 on DraftKings, I'm more likely to take a chance on that position for some salary relief in my cash games than other positions. As Drew said, not all opportunity is created equally. Not all positions offensively are created equally either. If I can find a first baseman that's around 4K, I don't have to pay all the way up to 5,500, though sometimes I will. Catchers, I'm willing to punt. Middle infielders, there's plenty of solid players that you can separate yourself from the field with other players. I'm looking for 1 home run, 2 home run potential from every power spot in my lineup. That means first base, third base, and all 3 outfield positions. When it comes to tournaments, I'm looking to stack. I'm looking to get as much exposure to the best offenses in the game as I can, because these tournaments are so very top heavy, and until DraftKings decides that they want to have more of an optimal, flatter payout structure, which is, in my opinion, better for the entire pool of players, as opposed to 30% of the prize pool going to first place, 28% of the prize pool going to first place. My perfect prize pool for me, 10% of the guaranteed prize pool going to first. It's a $500,000 tournament, $50K to first. 10% of first place goes to 10th place. That means 5K to 10th place. Paying out 18 to 20% of the field would be my perfect prize pool distribution, my perfect payout distribution that I want. That's the arc that I look for. They do exist in some tournaments during football season. It's in the slant. I'll see if they're out there in baseball tournaments, and I'll relay that to you guys as well. But I think that gives you a good primer to get ready for MLB season. So thank you guys for joining. I appreciate you all being here. Drew, thank you once again for doing another one of these videos with me. Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you for having me, Al.
Not a problem. We'll be back with in about a week from now with another video on how to build lineups using the optimizer over at Daily Roto. So be on the lookout for that video as well. I will stream that one live on Twitch. Links for my Twitch channel and all the other socials are right down below in the description. Click that show more button. If you've enjoyed this video, please click like, subscribe to the channel, ring the notifications bell, go make a sandwich, eat it, make sure that it's delicious, put some cheese on it, and good luck this baseball season. Bye, everybody.